I've been playing video games my entire life. Call of Duty, Tomb Raider, Croc. If it existed in a store and I could walk in and pick it up, I've probably played it. But for me, it wasn't until I discovered the indie roguelike genre that I was personally hooked. My childhood was filled with games like The Binding of Isaac, FTL, Spelunky, and later down the line, things like Slay the Spire, Nuclear Throne, and Darkest Dungeon. These games are synonymous for their unforgiving difficulty and their addictive nature. A game that doesn't hold your hand and takes hundreds of hours before you can even begin to master it. Games where you'd probably take a little bit of pride in saying, I'm good at this. I'm the guy who's good at Isaac or Slay the Spire. The Binding of Isaac took up more of my life than any game ever has, and Slay the Spire remains to be one of my favorite games of all time, if not my favorite. Despite this, there is a game, or rather a set of games, that's been living rent-free in my head for the past 3 months. Risk of Rain, a game released back in 2013 by Hobo Games, was and still is a truly unique experience. It stands out from the other roguelikes with its deep but not force-fed lore, its engaging combat, its art design, and its truly exceptional OST composed by Chris Christodoulou, which to this day is my favourite OST of any game ever. I'll be cooking, listening to my Spotify, then suddenly Coalescence will play, ruining my mental state for the rest of the day. It's really stupid, but I always think of this meme whenever Coalescence plays. I don't know. Anyway. After Risk of Rain, Chris obviously went on to do the soundtrack for Risk of Rain 2, which was the obvious choice, but he also went on to compose the soundtrack for one of my other fan favourite games, Deadbolt, which I don't see a lot of people talking about. Deadbolt's a really good game. You should, I'm not going to make a video on it, but you should definitely play it. Going back to Risk of Rain, I hadn't touched the game for years, until spontaneously I downloaded it on Switch and played a couple runs, which of course got me going and got me playing a couple hundred hours of it over on Steam. And the game still holds up. It's incredibly charming and better than half the indie games I've played over the last decade. Believe it or not, a decade later, I'm still finding things that I didn't even know were in the game. For example, sometimes there's a set piece that can be found on level 1 depending on what map you get. A chest that you can't reach by normal means and can only get to with characters possessing an ability capable of crossing that gap. However, playing with a controller with such an abysmal drift stick finally has its uses, because while going over the top of that section I discovered a ladder I never knew existed. Thank you, Risk of Rain. And of course, this isn't the only reason it's been on my mind. Back in 2013, Hopo released Risk of Rain Returns, a complete remake of the original game, and in my personal opinion, it stands as an example of what a remake should be. Should this video come across disorganized or schizophrenic, I'd like to blame it on the fact that this video script has been sat in my Google Documents for the past 2 years, and I've edited it countless times to the point I don't even remember the original purpose of the video. However, I want to be able to sleep at night with a clear conscience, and so this video needs to be finished, and that way my friends can stop yelling at me about not finishing it. And therefore I present a half-assed video containing my schizophrenic scribblings of the last 2 years, of which in the original file was titled Risk of Rain Returns, a guide to a good remake. So, when booting up Risk of Rain for the first time, you're presented with some info on what's actually going on through the form of a cutscene. You are one of many humans, among other things, travelling through space on a ship called the UES Contact Light. This is until some rando known as Providence boards your ship from a nearby planet and single-handedly destroys the entire ship. Alone or with a handful of others, you have to make for the escape pods. Your ship falls apart around you, and alongside the ship's debris, you plummet towards the nearest planet. And from right there, that's Risk of Rain. When in the escape pod, you're given pick of which character you would like to control, but before I can get into that, I need to explain what's actually going on in the game. The gameplay loop here is fairly similar to that of a lot of roguelikes or dungeon crawlers. Kill bad men, get the bag, buy items, and scale out of control. But where I think Risk of Rain differs from other roguelike is that the difficulty scales with time. Every few minutes that pass in-game increases enemy health, enemy damage, and adds elites to the pool, which the elites, they don't fuck around, they'll kill you. When starting a run, you have 3 presets that outlaw the speed at which the in-game difficulty increases, that being Drizzle, Rainstorm, and Monsoon. The difficulty bar starts at very easy, and it slowly creeps up to hard before the game just starts laughing at you, I guess. I've always admired this approach to difficulty scaling, as it effectively encourages the player to play fast and balance the risks. You're required to consider your pacing alongside your strength.
It might be nice to go back for those few items you missed, or stay around to grind money for the items you've just found, but that difficulty spike comes fast, it comes hard, and if you don't pay attention, you'll get swallowed up by this ever-evolving planet, struggle to stay afloat as the difficulty rises like a flood. Which of course, given the names of the preset difficulties, might be what the devs intended. Maybe. But it's not just the rising difficulty you have to worry about. Risk of Rain is a permadeath roguelike. One misclick, one bad call, and it's all over. Each run is individual, and when it's over you have absolutely nothing but your memories and your experiences going into the next one. Risk of Rain's world is vast, and each locale varies in both its design and its creatures that inhabit them. Each location being such a drastic change from the last gives this impression that you're really visiting every single inch of this planet on your way out. Not only is every map visually distinct, they change the way you're expected to play and navigate them. For instance, some maps are wide and relatively flat, which gives you a lot of space for combat positioning and long-range attacks, but leaves you a long distance to cover each level. Meanwhile, some maps are more vertical, leaving you with less space for dodging and positioning, but it also gives you more opportunities to run from a dangerous situation. These are just a few simple examples of how the topography of each map subtly alters your options. If you don't count the last level, there's 5 stages in total, the first 4 each having 2 possible maps the game will choose from, adding a bit of variety. Shout out to my favourite map, the Ancient Valley, which is just a dilapidated bridge over a huge ravine, absolutely immaculate vibes. Every level ends when you find your teleporter, fight the boss, and move on to the next. Reaching stage 5, which will always be the temple, you locate a teleporter much bigger than the rest, the one Providence probably used to invade your ship with. When the teleporter's charged, you're good to go. Except not really, because this is where the game does what we call a little prank. Because now there's 2 options, and the button that would usually teleport you to the next level is now teleport to previous levels. I have zero reason to believe this isn't intentional, and honestly, I find it really funny. I think this is as good a time as any to dive into what I consider one of Risk of Rain's most interesting mechanics, and more importantly, what becomes your endgame content. Most indie games have an almost loop-like effect in that you finish the run and you boot up the next one, but Risk of Rain was one of the first of its kind to implement a true endless experience that only ends when you either get bored or the game crashes from all the numbers on the screen. When you choose to visit previous levels, you're actually beginning what's known as a loop. You're taken back to the starting area, you've kept your levels, all your items, and yet, funnily enough, the game is just as hard as before. The difficulty slider remains the same, the spawn rates continue to go up, and it feels like every base enemy has been replaced with either an elite, or in classic Miyazaki fashion, a copy-pasted boss. Looping is incredibly chaotic and a completely different experience than you're used to thus far. The game's previous slow rising threat is replaced with a high stakes tug of war between you and the game's now rapidly scaling difficulty. Picture this scenario like a beam struggle in which the first to give the slightest leeway is completely annihilated by the other. Despite what you might think, the game's difficulty slider doesn't actually stop when it's full. It scales indefinitely off screen. That means even more health and enough damage that basic enemies will come close to killing you in just 2 or 3 hits. On the other hand, you've hoarded so many items at this point that the enemy either can't touch you, or can, but only because you're standing completely still and out healing the damage. Both parties are the unstoppable force, just waiting for the other to give out. Your first level of a loop acts as a filter. You either fly through it or get repeatedly stomped to death by a pack of children. The only middle ground I can think of is having the false sense of security that you are strong enough before running into one of these guys. I don't recommend having a one-on-one with the scavenger. That is unless you've been turning the map into a homogeneous paste up until now. The scavenger is a boss that only appears during loops, or if you're playing on Monsoon, as early as very hard. We can gather from the in-game logbook that the scavenger is the only one of its kind, given that the players only ever encountered one of them, who, seemingly since the ship's debris crash landed, has just been off playing the game without you, collecting items and scaling out of control just as you are. His attacks even have items that he uses against you, such as the ukulele blast, the brilliant behemoth, and a disposable missile launcher. You and the scavenger aren't really all that different, just 2 creatures trying to survive that happen to meet in the middle. If by chance you happen to be playing this game with friends, this is also around the time when the weaker build starts to show. You might or might not be wondering why I'm mentioning what I would consider the end game content before discussing, I don't know, the end of the game. It's a little anecdotal, but on release, me and a handful of my friends thought looping was the rest of the game.
Because we were too smooth-brained to stop and read the aforementioned teleporter text, we went 2 weeks before we even realised Providence was a thing. We knew he was in the game, we just didn't know you could get to him. So to me, this is chronologically correct. If you were patient enough to read the text and press the correct button, you'll teleport to the final level, Risk of Rain.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about.
I think it's worth going a little more in detail here with this level, as it contains mechanics not seen up until now. The UES fuck. I know the game looks like shit when it's fully zoomed out, but please just stick with me on this, I promise it's worth it. The UES contact light spawns you in one of 4 aft bays located at the back of the ship. Each is sealed off with a large airlock door, which are on timers to unlock, kind of how teleporters function. You can explore each one and gather supplies before moving on to the midsection of the ship. A hallway that leads into 4 separate secured rooms, these being storage, armory, medical, and cabin. Each of these rooms are locked and require a keycard to open.
So that was a fucking lie.
Keycards that rarely drop from enemies and can only be found in golden containers otherwise. Each room brings something special to the table, so if you don't have enough keycards and you don't have time to wait around to grind more of them, you kinda have to pick and choose. Storage contains a ludicrous amount of item chests, and the armory gives you a large gauze cannon to teleport into the final fight. It also has 10 golden chests which contain more aggressive based items like ATGs or mortars. The medical room will have a medical bed that you can teleport to the final fight and has a few health based items scattered around if you're lucky. And finally, the cabin has a nano chest that teleports to the final fight, which upon using spawns a random active item. To be honest, these rooms are not built equally, the storage is goated and the armory is a close second, and on most of my runs I genuinely forget that the other 2 are even there, even if I have the keycards on hand. After opening 2 airlock doors and an attempt at starting up the ship, Providence locks the doors behind you and seemingly teleports right in front of you. This fight plays more like a traditional boss fight, having multiple stages to the fight and having a surprisingly large arsenal of attacks that make Providence incredibly flexible during battle. For instance, Providence starts the fight by using instant transmission to teleport above your head and slash downwards into you, continuing to do so anytime you gain any significant distance. By the time you get used to his pattern, he'll thrust his sword into the metal of the ship's floor, sending out shockwaves to trip your feet up, before launching into a flurry of delayed projectile slashes that chase you across the entire length of the screen. And all of this is just stage 1. Stage 2 has you being chased and attacked by 2 guild worms you've never seen before. They look like a unique reskin of the magma worm, but it's probably a near extinct species because you've never seen one, making you wonder why Providence would even have these and why they're under him in the first place. They take turns shooting out lasers and projectiles before tagging out to send Providence back in. Stage 3 is the same as Stage 1 in every single way, except now there's 2 of them. Providence has completely severed himself from his own shadow, and causes a small delayed second attack on everything he does, halving your breathing room and giving you little chance to punish whenever he stands still. Sometimes they even completely separate and do their own separate attacks, and it gets very chaotic. After a drawn out exchange, Providence falls to his knees and seemingly vanishes. Providence has the chance to drop his logbook, not that I've ever been lucky enough to see it in my 50 hours of playing this game again. The logbook contains the survivor's personal take on the encounter with Providence, commending him for his speed and power, while questioning how much influence he must have had to guide and command this planet, including those giant worms you've never seen before. The survivor is surprisingly doubtful about killing Providence, having to reassure themselves on record that there really wasn't any other choice, but that something feels terribly wrong about what they've done, before asking the big question. Why did we have a teleporter from this planet in our cargo hold? These logbooks are the only real source of information you're going to get about the game, but this logbook in particular is my favourite. Is there possibly more to Providence? A deeper meaning behind his actions? Actually, yes. You see, Providence is actually quite missing. Anyway, with the big bad Providence defeated, our survivors can return home. At the end of the run, you're given any new characters or items that you've unlocked to look forward to next time, similar to unlocks in The Binding of Isaac or FTL, which will contribute towards its endless playtime. The sheer number of items in Risk of Rain is huge, and they span from pretty tame to absolutely ridiculous. For example, some of the tamer items give effects such as standing still heals you, not standing still heals you, being hit heals you, and hitting back heals you. Very good. However, other items do things like chance to fire a heat-sinking missile on every single hit. Triple the chance to do that exact thing. All your attacks? Yeah, they explode now and deal 20% of your damage to nearby enemies. How about the ability to reduce skill cooldowns by 1 second every single time you crit, which in the late game is every time you hit? Maybe you'd like to charge an invisible bar while using your skills, and when it reaches its max, you completely wipe the map with a giant laser beam. And lastly, Risk of Rain contains a Gurren Lagann reference, making every 4th attack pierce through all enemies. Or if you're playing a melee character, infinite range. Don't believe in yourself, believe in RNG to give you 4 of these in a row, and then you never have to worry about not piercing. I could talk at great lengths about the items and their various effects, but this section's getting a little lengthy. Just know your runs are sometimes going to look a little bit like this. Now that we've talked about gameplay, I can finally talk about characters, and how characters in Risk of Rain all have unique and creative playstyles that differ from each other in some way, with a few exceptions. Each one will have 4 attacks, being their primary, their secondary, their utility, and a special attack. We'll start with the Commando and the Huntress, since they are the 2 you start with by default. They're extremely simple and easy to pick up, but they're not very strong, having very basic attacks, a piercing or bouncing secondary, a noteworthy dodge utility with iframes, and a special attack that I genuinely don't remember what it does. Their moveset consists of running from one end of a horde, turning around and shooting before running past them to do it again and rinse repeat. It's almost nostalgic in a way, but I can't put my finger on it. Regardless, they are great starting characters for when you're just getting used to the game, and their simple fast attacks are great for learning how items worked based on hit chance. Where Commando and Huntress are quite similar, the rest of the escape pod is, to put it delicately, actually fun to play, providing abilities that flow into some sort of combo or flexible playstyle. The Bandit has a very run and gun playstyle, using his shotgun and dynamite to whittle down enemies and throwing down smoke bombs when things get too intense, stunning those around him and turning invisible for a few seconds, only coming out of smoke to fire off his special ability, Lights Out, which if it kills, resets all cooldowns, including Lights Out. This is the makings of an extremely aggressive but precise character that can be left with too many openings if you miss that last shot, and you will miss that last shot. I have had runs where I miraculously whip out consecutive Lights Out one after another, but most of the time I whiff and die. The Enforcer, unlike the Squishy Bandit, is an absolute unit, stanced up with his shield blocking all incoming damage from the front while speeding up all fire rate. Anything in front of you gets completely obliterated, and anything that does get too close to you, you can just smack away. His only downside being his mobility, but the Enforcer doesn't need mobility. In fact, he's the slowest character in the game, but he won't get hit, at least not from the front. From here we're going to move on to one of my personal favourite characters, the Sniper.
Sniping's a good job, mate.
Sniper is easily one of the most difficult characters for new players to get the hang of. You have to perform a quick time event after every shot, in which your success will determine the damage of your next shot. This takes a little getting used to, but once you've got the timing down, you can effectively rapid fire and perfect reload every single time. Sniper can backflip to gain some distance,
Oh no.
and you can send out your drone to signal out the strongest enemy on screen to increase your damage against them. The absolute bread and butter of the Sniper, however, is in their secondary, locking yourself in place and charging up a piercing shot to wipe out all enemies in a horde. Now, I know I just ripped on the first 2 for having Call of Duty Zombies level gameplay, but Sniper does get a pass. Why, you might ask? Well, because Sniper can do this. The set of skills that Sniper have create Risk of Rain's perfect glass cannon, being easily overwhelmed but having enough damage to just wipe a boss from existence. Next on my list to talk about is the Engineer. And let me tell you, my man, he's got it all. Enemies too far away, activate heat-sinking missiles. Enemies too close, set up a minefield, plant 2 automatic turrets, and sit on the edge of the battle and kill everything before it's even able to get close to you. NG is incredibly fun and plays differently in that your damage is dealt through what you place and how you place it. Some people have considered the Engineer boring or too slow, and those people probably haven't had the pleasure of reading a book in the past 20 years. I have personally yet to experience and have vivid dreams about a 4-man NG team. That's 8 turrets. That's statistically more than 2. It should also be noted that I've managed to reduce the NG's cooldown so much that he can do things like this, effectively cosplaying as a chrome pyramid from Caves of Quud. Which, by the way, if you haven't heard of that game, I'm really sorry. Caves of Quud 1.0 apparently dropped earlier this year, and I just didn't notice. However, if you haven't played the game, now's a perfect time to, because it looks so much more accessible than it ever has. Maybe finish the video first though, please?
I've mostly been talking about the ranged characters of the game, but Risk of Rain has a surprising amount of melee-based characters too. Acrid, who I'm legally obligated to mention is the cutest of dogs, can be found in a shipping container halfway through the game. You free him from slavery, immediately put him down, and the next time you select a character you can play as him. Acrid is first presented as a melee-focused character with a tiny bit of crowd control, but is in fact a highly effective hit-and-run character that returns to kill off anything alive. His primary attacks not only deal normal damage, but they also cause stackable poison damage over time. His utility allows him to spread toxic sludge all over the floor, making you go fast and the enemy go slow, while again also being poisoned. And finally, his special, Epidemic, shoots out an airborne virus that will repeatedly multiply from enemy to enemy until it has nothing left to affect. Oh, Fire Punch reference. All of these moves I've just spoke about apply stackable poison damage, which in just a small amount of time puts the enemy in a state where they're already dead. Acrid completely decimates hordes, setting up huge kill chains that take advantage of items that proc on kill. You can let Epidemic's dot damage take effect before swooping in to finish the job, and even then, what's stopping you from sending in the sequel? Epidemic 2, baby! Despite being a melee character, Acrid doesn't really get his hands dirty, and that's where the Miner comes in. He's the only character I can think of that's always in the thick of it, but given just enough maneuverability with his set of skills that he can survive it. Dashing forward, grouping up enemies, launching backwards into them to stun them, all before leaping into the air to damage whatever's below him. He's incredibly cool, fast, and later on when discussing Risk of Rain Returns, I want to talk about how he gets some of the best changes in the remake. Similarly with the Mercenary, who overall feels like it should be a really cool character, but it's just not all that powerful, kind of like the Miner. I remember loving this character as a kid, but coming back to it as an arguably fully grown adult, this dude is not that good, and again, gets incredible changes later on that I can't talk about just yet. I'm being particularly biased and a little harsh. Mercenary is and can be very fun, and when you get the right items in place and you scale out with control, he can be very effective. I just personally don't have him as my first choice. Speaking of my first choice, now we can talk about the best character in Risk of Rain, the GOAT, if you will. And that is, of course, Chef. I fucking love Chef. Best character in the game, and by far the most creative moveset. You have this endless supply of meat cleavers to throw at your enemy, that magically return to you, hitting them on the rebound. These are also surprisingly faster than you'd expect, so you get these times where enemies are just being pincushioned from both ends. His secondary launches a stream of piercing fire, and his utility covers the enemy in oil, slowing them down. These last two moves actually form a very powerful combo, since glazed enemies take more damage and knockback from your secondary attack. So you usually want to glaze through enemies first, and then turn around. Oh god, it's Call of Duty again. Chef's final and fourth ability is completely, I know I say unique a lot, but completely unique from any other character in the game, as it's not a move in itself, rather than you activate it, and any move used after activation becomes an upgraded version of its former self. Your meat cleavers will shoot out all around you. You'll ride your wave of oil for much longer, and Sia just is better, longer, and more powerful. I can't quite say why Chef is my favourite. I think it has something to do with the personality he brings to the table, and the animations and sound effects and moveset overall. And though it might sound like steering and glazing might get old, the ultimate move really does come in clutch to just add a bit of variety throughout your run. There are 12 characters in total, and even though I made you wait this long before talking about them, I'm not actually going to finish up on the last few characters in much detail, or at all. However, what I do want to shed some light on when it comes to details is in the game's lore, and how in Risk of Rain, the lore, though not really necessary, is really good. You are required to piece it together yourself through both the first and second game's logbooks and item descriptions. God, where have I seen that mechanic before? Which, I'll admit, I only did in 2023, despite the game being a decade old, but it's so worth it. The game is filled with detailed texts and artwork about the items, the creatures, and like I discussed before, Providence himself. Providence, despite his actions, is not actually a bad guy. Providence created a safe haven for endangered species to live in peace and prolong their existence. Meanwhile, you and the UES Contact Light were effectively performing a space drive-by of the planet with one of their teleporters on board and a shit ton of cages and storage containers. I shouldn't have to explain to you why that might not give the best first impression. There is a reason he is called Bulwark of the Weak. Providence's only stated flaw is that he's literally too nice, going out of his way to save species that are going out of their way to speedrun their entire race. But Providence doesn't leave them, he can fix them. In summary, Providence did nothing wrong and humanity can go fuck itself. He is the absolute best boy, and if we're lucky, we might even see him in the new DLC for Risk of Rain 2 that just got announced. So, real quick, I wrote this back in 2023, and since then, Gearbox, who did buy out Hopo, released their DLC, and it was truly abysmal. Terrible code, characters that don't feel like they belong in the game, and a bug that made it so FPS scaled enemies' health and attack speed. I've been following Hopo since the very beginning. I watched them cultivate this series over an entire decade. And Gearbox ruined it in a matter of minutes. To my knowledge, there has been tweaks and fixes to the game since then, but I didn't personally play it myself when it happened. I kinda just looked the other way and moved on to my 30-second playthrough of XCOM Long War, and slowly sank into addiction. I think I've made it abundantly clear that I consider Risk of Rain something truly special. So, when Hopo announced they were making Risk of Rain Returns, a complete remake of the original, you'd think I'd have a reaction something along these lines, but I was more just confused than anything else. I think I was grinding out 6 or 7 hours of Risk of Rain 2 a day around the time Returns was announced, and I wasn't quite sure how I felt about it. In regards to the second game, I was also very skeptical at first. It was a weird direction to go in, transferring a 2D game to a 3D space. However, on release, I found myself in love with this new era of Risk of Rain, and so did the internet, as Risk of Rain 2 was a huge success, bigger than the original ever was. Probably because it had multiplayer, I don't know, that could have had something to do with it. With Risk of Rain Returns, I was excited, but I wasn't expecting much other than working multiplayer and some slight graphical improvements. I'm willing to admit, I have a pretty unhealthy relationship when it comes to remakes or remasters. They can be incredibly hit or miss. You'll have games re-releasing every couple of years to grab an extra wad of cash, but adding little or no content at all, pretty much changing nothing about it. I don't think I even need to bring up the several re-releases of Skyrim over the years. Still haven't played the game, probably never will. Please stop re-releasing it. To me, it feels like the games that often get remakes don't actually need them. Meanwhile, games that are over a decade old and aren't accessible anymore, games that could really shine in a new era or maybe didn't quite land because they just needed more development time, don't get the attention they need, and we miss out and also forget games as they age. Like, I would give anything to play Billy Hatcher again without having to emulate it. On a more positive note, there have been some that have reinvented the original and massively expanded upon it. A clear example I have in mind is that of the Resident Evil 2 remake. Taking a game with fixed camera angles and pre-rendered backgrounds, only to give it a full 3D world with a third-person over-the-shoulder camera, while keeping everything that made the older games thrilling and engaging. The remake even alters mechanics to make much more sense with a more realistic looking game, such as zombies having the ability to follow you through doors if not careful about how close they are to them, or if they can hear you through them. And I think I need to explain just how terrifying that actually is. Playing a game you've technically played so much you know where every enemy is, even if you're blindfolded, and suddenly, the enemy you passed 20 minutes ago isn't fucking there. It's incredible, and I can't help but applaud it. The changes that are in the remake feel like they were always meant to be there. Rather than Mr. X only showing up in the B-plot, after a certain section of the game, he becomes a constant threat, stalking you throughout the entirety of the police station. Another change that throws a spanner into the works that is my muscle memory of the past 20 years. I tend to just trip or kite zombies so I can save the ammo. Unless you plan on backtracking, there isn't much incentive for wasting the bullets, but God forbid you've played like this, because Mr. X can hear a fart from the other side of the building. You can still use your gun, just know he's on his way.
Marvin! Oh no. Damn it! I'll stop this, Lieutenant. I promise.
X gon' give it to you. Wait for you to get it on your own.
Another perfect example of how to handle a remake is the 2014 release of The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, a complete remake of the original Flash game on a new engine with everything in the game remade from scratch. The game looks incredible, there's new items, routes and levels. Overall the game plays and feels more complete,
This remake is a perfect example because it's pretty much the go-to now. If you want to play Isaac, it's just the original, but better in every single aspect. Over the years, Isaac even received several full game-sized expansions, of which the most recent, and hopefully the last DLC we get, Repentance, perfected the game and removed any and all problem I've had with it since the previous DLC. Several duplicate items that bloat the pool and don't actually add variety, gone, improved, and given unique stats and interactions. Boring characters that are basically repeats of Isaac cross-dressing, double the amount of characters and give them all vastly different playstyles that change the entire flow of the game. Cain having to craft his items, Maggie having to eat her enemies, and Judas is just cool as fuck. While we're at it, why not add a few new endings to the game, alternate paths, item unlocks, maybe a mechanic that requires you to go backwards from Mom to get to a completely new section of the game. Everything, and I mean everything about Repentance is perfection. Leave it to Isaac to get a remake that fixes the entire game, and then a DLC that fixes the entire remake. Now, originally I had planned 2 games as examples for both good and bad remakes, and this is why I would have discussed the bad. However, in quite an interesting way, while replaying one of the games, I found myself falling completely in love with it all over again, and I feel like it would be a disservice to not discuss it in a positive light. This game is called Kingdom. Now, just to be clear, I'm not referring to Kingdom New Lands, Kingdom Two Crowns, Kingdom Northlands, or even the 80s. I'm referring to what is now known as Kingdom Classic. If you've never heard of Kingdom, it's a 2D side-scrolling tower defense game that has you managing the economy and structure of a village trying to survive against a literal endless threat. The year this game came out, there really wasn't much that grabbed my attention quite like, wait, I'm pretty sure Downwell came out the same year, and that was pretty cool, so never mind, scratch that. Anyway, let's just say Kingdom caught my eye. There's very few games where you get to exploit the homeless and get away with it. The original fell short of a few things like bugs and no endgame content. There's also the fact that after so many hours you realise there's very little option in playstyle or strategy. Well, other than how you choose to make your money. Which I'll tell you now, is always through corn. It's always corn. It didn't stop me playing an unhealthy amount of this game during my school years though. I found myself often wishing for more updates or even just DLC. And although Classic didn't get any DLC, and in the original script I criticised the future of this series, we did get new content through the release of Kingdom New Crowns. A more polished version of Kingdom with new visuals, better performance, fixed bugs, new enemies, changes to combat, and most importantly, a new progression system, having you build a boat to get off your island to progress through 6 other islands of increasing opportunity and difficulty. For example, giving you access to stone structures or access to better shrines that improve your villages. It is as close to a final version of Classic as we were ever going to get. It is technically a remake, and a pretty damn good one worthy of its price tag. But where I personally saw an issue with the series is with the addition of Two Crowns. Two Crowns was another standalone that was released after New Lands, with its main features being almost double the content from the last game alongside multiplayer. However, where I pick fault is in its structure of progression, making the islands you visit scripted. So every run is the same once you get the hang of the game, and that was going to be my main criticism, that the game just keeps reselling itself but with minimal changes or not great ones, and the changes you do like are limited to one of the standalone games instead of all of them. But now that I'm playing it again, I can only feel thankful that these changes are exclusive to their own game and not ruining the other versions of the game that I enjoy to play. Now that I've discussed the games that I think stand out in a good way, I want to talk about some specific games that don't, excluding games such as AAA reruns. The 2018 remaster of Dark Souls wasn't really bad, but it wasn't good either. The graphics were questionable and worse in some areas of the game compared to the original. It had botched lighting, adding too much shine and removing the really dark and murky atmosphere the game was known for. For some reason they even took out the ethereal bonfires to replace it with just generic fire. Why? Who decided this? I just want to talk. I can't get my head around it. They missed out on reinventing unfinished aspects of the game, specifically Lost Izalith and the Bed of Chaos, one of the last areas of the game that was rushed due to time constraints and is infamous in the community for being one of the worst areas in the game. I can't imagine having this chance to remedy something that both the community and the developers accept was a rushed part of the game, and just choosing not to. To top it all off, the original Dark Souls Prepare to Die edition was removed from the Steam store. So now, you just have this one option of a kind of botched remake until the modding community can fix it. Which, funnily enough, they did. The remastered mod exists.
The remaster does have a couple pros, having 60 FPS without needing to be modded and also online active servers, which the original Prepare to Die edition no longer has. I'm no sellout, but I have to hear those bells just one more time.
I made the decision to add Kingdom to the good remakes list, not even days before finishing this video. So I didn't really have much time to come up with a second bad example if I wanted to get this out before Christmas. But to be honest, I think the good examples give me more of what to look for in a game than any bad examples going to teach me to avoid. I think there are things to consider when bringing a game back to life. Does it need to? Has it been long enough? Is it not as easily accessible anymore? Are you going to reinvent it into something fresh, or improve on the original, pulling it up to heights it could have been with more time and money? And I can say with confidence that Risk of Rain Returns does all of this and more. Risk of Rain launched more than a decade ago. Its graphics are dated, and its multiplayer doesn't even work unless you download some malware lookalike. The game is absolutely incredible, but it isn't perfect. There is so much that could be improved upon. Risk of Rain Returns is a goddamn masterpiece of a project, and a monumental send-off to Hopo as they move on to different things. It all started back in 2022, when on December 20th, a surprise teaser dropped for the Risk of Rain Returns trailer. A beautiful and detailed animation depicting the original events of Providence invading the ship, and, I gotta be honest, watching Providence single-handedly wipe out the entire ship, it's incredible and unnecessarily cool. You even get to see Providence on his funny little worms watching the ship come in orbit. I love him, but why did they make my man so thick? I gotta ask, whose creative choice was this? They might have got a little too funky with him. And as cool as this trailer is, I don't trust cinematics. I was around for Killzone's The Walking Dead game. Not a single bit of gameplay before launch, and yeah, I can see why. Imagine trying to advertise this complete slop. But my point is, I'm not gonna fall for it again. This single trailer alone had me completely converted. I dropped everything, and I mean everything I was doing at the time of its release, just so I could play Risk of Rain Returns. I don't think I could start this with anything other than talking about the visuals. Risk of Rain Returns looks incredible. It's a complete marvel to look at. Calling it an improvement doesn't even do it justice. Around the time this game released, I'd go as far as to call it some of the best sprite work I've seen in years. My personal favourite at the very least. Everything, and I mean everything, is completely remade from scratch, with more detail than ever before, giving you a much more in-depth look at the creatures you've been fighting for the last decade. I don't think it's a stretch to call the first game's sprite work pretty limited. Some sprites really had me questioning what they were and what they were doing half the time. And I have to ask, what even is the scavenger? I mean, we still don't know, but we know that this wasn't its head and these weren't actually its nipples. I still don't know what the spitter is. I don't think I'm supposed to. I know it was called a fire shield, but how was I ever supposed to accept that this was a shield and not some blob? The items, the enemies, the bosses, they don't feel like a small improvement. It feels like an entirely different game, where everything was made to outshine the original. Except Providence, he's more or less the same, and I'm really glad they didn't change too much about him. The fight with the Colossus is a great example of what I'm talking about. Prior to Returns, they just look like an upscale of a regular stone golem. But now they're an absolute behemoth, a moving fortress with little teeny tiny windows on it. So remember, every time you defeat a Colossus, you're most likely destroying someone's home. This attention to detail on all the new sprites is paired with fluid and clean animations that make everything feel more alive and adds to the overall atmosphere of the game. If there's one way to describe these changes, it's smooth. Everything flows so well together compared to the sliding PNGs of the original game. And the game won't let this drastic change in quality go unnoticed either. Each run ends with a credit sequence showing off the comparison of sprite work, old and new. All the stages and maps get completely overhauled as well, with the backgrounds and the platforms of the level having some much needed detail to make them pop. This upgrade does a commendable job of capturing this unique and captivating world that Providence has cultivated before your arrival, and it goes a step further to make each area stand out. Each area also gets a few new layouts and variants to keep you from getting too used to them. Even the style of the UI has been reimagined. The logbook UI and the artwork specifically received some stylish new portraits that really do make you stop and appreciate all the work that went into them. The new boss artwork personally encouraged me to stop and flick through the logbooks from time to time, and funnily enough, that's the only reason I ever read Providence's logbook and started dipping my toes into the lore. When you can actually hear what's going on in the game, you'll notice that the sound effects are drastically improved and everything has a lot more weight to it. Just listen to this menu screen. Blip, blip, blop, blip, blop. I was a little worried that they were going to completely butcher the soundtrack, but I'm happy to say not only did the soundtrack return, so did Chris. And by God, he's done it again. The only creator where every album you buy, you get a free roguelike attached to it. Each and every track has been remastered in a way that still holds true to the original while enhancing certain segments of each piece. I thought for a while on how best to show this, but I couldn't really land on anything that fit right or felt like it hadn't already been said. The changes aren't that needing of an analytical breakdown, it's just better. Everything about the game is so much better, and it didn't need to be, but it is. Like, if the game was just made now, instead of back then, I feel like this is what the game would have been. And as far as remakes go, this is all they were required to do. This is all anybody expects from a half-decent remaster nowadays. If it looks good and it plays better, that's a pass. But where most people are okay with just getting that pass, Hopper wanted something that surpassed expectations. They weren't going to stop at just a really good coat of paint. I mentioned the teaser before, but one thing I didn't realise until I watched some reviews online was that the Artificer shouldn't fucking be there. I must have forgotten from my extensive hours from Risk of Rain 2 that she don't belong. Returns brings to the table several of quality life changes, items and mechanics that were introduced in Risk of Rain 2. Changes that fix a lot of what held the original game back. Things like only needing to defeat a boss to advance to the next level. The ability to move and shoot with every single character in the game. Color coordinated chests to better incentivize sharing, of which neither me or a single one of my friends are remotely capable of.
Didn't think to check see if the settings are for
You should check everything.
I want it!
Didn't ask!
Go.
You took it and I paid for it, you're paying for my next chest, or I'm gonna come in there and beat you up on it into your fucking life! New UI, new logbooks, and run statistics, which we're not going to look at too closely. We have custom skins for every single character, much more flexible UI and zoom in scaling and accessibility options. And lastly, Shrines of the Mountain also make an appearance, and if you're not accustomed to these, don't worry, you will be. To not activate a Shrine of the Mountain is an act of cowardice, and I'd rather die a fool than extend a run as a coward. There's even completely original content exclusive to Risk of Rain Returns. Several new drone types, combining stations where you can upgrade your drones at the cost of 3 of them, and scrapping stations where you can get rid of a drone to get an item of the same rarity. And when it comes to items, we have returns from the second game, exclusives to this game, and overall stat tweaks, buffs, and improvements to all previously known items. The addition of Red Whip in a game where time is so crucial, and finding the portal can take 3 to 4 minutes, peak. Also, at least now, the Ancient Scepter actually has a stack effect. Everything I've just talked about, it all slips in like it was always meant to be there, and the quality of life improvements really give you some breathing room, and the game fucking needs it, because Returns is so much harder than the original game. It took me a full week before I was cranking out Providence kills, and that was on Rainstorm. I'm really glad that the additions that would appear as a removal of difficulty are actually more just balancing out this hellish experience that they've created. I've heard a lot of people were getting a little filtered by this game on release, but it's kind of calmed down now. Even as an OG of this series, I love these changes, but some people might not, and that's why you can change them. In the new character select screen, you can effortlessly swap between modern and the classic 2013 experience you're used to. You can even pick and choose between the new content.
However, sadly, for those who are itching for torture, the ability to move and shoot cannot be reversed. We have evolved and we're not going back. I've played around with both, and I just don't see a reason not to play on Modern. It's good, it's better in every single way, but it's nice to see a developer thinking about what the customer would want, adding those options, and creating choices within their own experience. Meanwhile, some people make a game and just rip it from the Steam store like it never happened, and I'm not salty about this. Now, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but I felt like it deserved a lot more attention. Alternate abilities also make a comeback, adding more variety to characters that really needed it. You can mix and match different abilities to form a new core combo, or even just fuck around with lots of different attack patterns. Some of these admittedly drop the ball, but overall they add a lot of gameplay, and you can stumble onto some pretty fun interactions just by fucking around and finding out. The mercenary gets a parry button, which can not only deflect fall damage, it's a pretty viable way of dealing it too. Handy, on the other hand, gets multiple drone types instead of just his healing ones from the first game. The speed drone increases attack speed indefinitely with each hit, and the blast drone does exactly what it says on the tin. It's fast, lethal, and each kill gives you more drones that just extend the endless barrage. The Enforcer gets some much needed mobility, being able to charge in and push back enemies. Combined with a well-timed shield stance, you can even pull the entire group behind you, keeping everything on one side. The Bandit gets a new version of Lights Out that scales with damage instead of refreshing cooldowns. They also get a whip, and for some reason one of the most bullshit moves in the entire game. The flashbang blinds all enemies affected by it, and blinded enemies can't attack you. And this lasts a whole 7 seconds. It's kinda wild. Do you know what I can do in 7 seconds? The sniper gets some of my favourite alternates in the entire remake. If you swap out every move for its alternative, you have officially become a gamer. Quickscope your enemies, bullet hop in and out of combat, but most importantly, you can use the gun the way it was originally intended to be used. Chef shows up to become the best character in the game, as per usual, no one's surprised. But now he can get up close and personal for more damage and throw oil all over the battlefield. This oil applies the same effects as glaze, but with the added bonus of being able to glide along it and stay out of reach. The upgraded version of these moves that you acquire for your special are both really good. But unfortunately, the ult is so good you're never going to use them. Chef can now cook and eat anything he comes across to gain a temporary buff. Lizards, crabs, sentient humanoid clay, none of it is safe from Chef's pursuit of flavour. These buffs are kind of insane too. They can stack and give effects such as increased health regeneration, increased damage, temporary maximum HP, cooldown reductions on all your skills, and slowing down enemies in your area. These meals can be shared with your party as well, but why on earth would you do that? The loader somehow ends up less fun than the artificer, and the engineer gets a massive cannon. And would you believe it if I were to tell you that the Commander and Huntress are actually fun to play now? Alongside these new abilities, Returns makes several changes to characters' base mechanics, such as the engineer's turrets inheriting his items. Bungus boys, we're so back! If you're generating money through piggy bank, your turret is also generating money through piggy bank. If you have Hourglass, they'll stop time when they die. One of the most busted synergies has to be having Dio's best friend, effectively giving your turrets a free life every time they're deployed. The miner had a whole new system implemented in the means of a heat gauge. It builds up as you attack and is used alongside your regular moves to make them stronger, or last longer. When the heat gauge is full, you go into something called an overdrive. You deal double damage, attack faster, and you alternate your moveset in ways that make you way more flexible, such as removing the cooldown on your dash and jumping attacks at the cost of heat gauge, allowing you to spam them as much as you want. I believe this one change completes Minor and allows him to stand with the other characters. It gives him strength, speed, and flexibility alongside being really fun and engaging. He's still extremely vulnerable and squishy, but now you have this addition that gives you much more control over your own survivability. I mentioned before that the ability to move and shoot was added, but this is one single change that gives you so much more control over every single character. Especially melee characters who tend to attack past an enemy more often than they don't. Or the Brainrot gang who really couldn't ever afford to stand still before. So overall, all the previous characters feel drastically improved. But what about new characters? Returns features 3, technically 4, new characters. These 4 being the Artificer from Risk of Rain 2, the Pilot and the Drifter, which are exclusive to Returns, and lastly, this tedious little prick that I have still yet to unlock. Given that I haven't unlocked them, I'm not going to talk about them. The Robomando is hidden behind a set of steps that, despite having far too much free time on my hand, I can't personally be bothered to do. Likewise, I'm not going to talk about the Artificer either, because the Artificer sucks complete arse. So out of the 2 characters added in Returns, let's discuss the Pilot first. Because to be honest, I really like the Pilot. They look really cool and their moveset is incredibly fun. Having continuous pistol shots that pierce on every third hit, and a diagonal barrage that locks onto enemies depending on your placement. You can either use your parachute to soar above the horde, using your shots to keep yourself afloat, or you can plant your feet on the ground and use airstrikes to launch groups of enemies into the air for a clean shot. The Pilot's base moveset is the most flexible and mobile moveset in the entire game. You have so much at your disposal and you feel like a complete badass being able to do something in every possible scenario. If you get your hands on enough secondhand magazines, you can effectively have an unlimited stream of secondary shots. Oh, and the Pilot can also do this shit. I don't know if it was an intentional thing or a bug, but it's been years and thankfully it's still in the game. The only other good character added to Risk of Rain, being the Drifter, has a touch more of a chaotic playstyle. Enemies drop scrap when damaged, or when insta-killed with Drifter's utility, and from there the rest of the moveset opens up to you. At the cost of scrap that you've been collecting, you can launch out that very same scrap to pierce and shred through enemies, only limited by the amount of scrap you currently possess. That's not the peak of Drifter's capabilities though. Completely exhausting a full sack of scrap will spawn 4 randomized items that can be picked up by either you or your friends to gain its effects for about 80 seconds. If you can keep this up, you become very powerful very quickly, and this pairs quite nicely with a chef in the party. Drifter is the only character where you will go from clearing stages at a breakneck pace, only to forget to keep up your temporary buffs and running headfirst into your own grave. One of Drifter's alt moves is also really funny. Your balls of scrap are replaced with thick brick walls, which at first sounds incredibly fucking stupid. And you're right, it is, but not for the reasons you'd think it would be. These walls stack, are moved by your attacks, deal damage each movement, and you can Tony Hawk your way through hordes avoiding floor damage. I think next to Pilot's instant transmission, this is probably my favourite mechanic in Returns. But only if we ignore the actual best mechanic in Returns, working multiplayer. And since I never got to play it back in the day, I'm certainly making up for lost time. Playing Risk of Rain with friends can be fairly chaotic, or just a rather chill catalyst for hanging out in call.
Yeah,
Have you got fungus?
now.
Yeah.
How many drones do I
You
got?
fucking liar, you
Hey.
don't have fungus.
Oh, you meant fungus. They meant the fungus, which is this. That is there.
The what?
Fungus.
What fungus?
Active item.
Man can
It's
teleport.
not called fungus, is it? It's called the foreign fruit, you stupid cunt. Can't you read? Did you go to fucking university?
All I know, look at
Did you go fucking uni? You stupid cunt. Yeah, get him, Gus. All part of the plan. Oh!
25 pigs have entered your area.
There's no incentive to stick together and no incentive not to. Nothing stopping someone from gobbling up every item they find.
No, I think we're being goblins.
I don't know what you mean. I'm poor. I have nothing.
Are you serious? You
I
have the
have
most
no
items in the
idea.
game currently.
Ignore that,
I had
ignore
0
that, ignore
items.
it, no.
You schizoid?
I started in chest like 5 minutes. I was like, oh, let me save a little bit more. I'm sweating. And I watched as Nathan looked at me, stood still, walked over, opened the chest, and grabbed
Yeah.
the item.
Yeah, that sounds like Nathan. I'm proud of him.
What's this?
Thank you, thank you. Oh. Wow. Wow, okay.
I'm sorry, Nathan.
It's good.
One of my favourite things in this, and I'm not going to call anyone out, but I am calling them out, is all of us are fucking loot goblins, and all of us will happily steal all of the fucking loot. But then, like, the second a boss item drops, like, it's not even a good item. It's fucking, like, barbed wire or crowbar, and someone takes it, and I'm like, they'll be like, well then. And if we say that we're like 15 fucking items in this inventory, and someone with none has took it, and he'll be like, well, me on my bed of, like, Mark II missiles, as someone takes a crowbar from me. Well then, I see how it is. No, not loyalty in this group, is there?
It just can't be loyal these days.
And more importantly, no one's stopping me from activating these shrines. It's funny, you'd think more people would lead to an easier experience, but in Risk of Rain Returns, it's the exact opposite.
Hold the line, Jade. Jade! That's not what I meant!
I don't know if it's the sheer inability to cooperate or the game's multiplayer scaling, but you're going to die a lot. Thankfully, Returns has a mechanic where after you die, you come back as a drone temporarily, allowing you to help out your teammates and possibly take a few items, so you're not totally fucked for the next stage. There is one last thing I want to draw attention to, since the script's getting rather lengthy and I really need it to be over with, is the addition of Providence Trials, a new unlock system, separate to the main game, where you participate in custom crafted collections of challenges and minigames, granting you access to skins, items, and an alternate way to unlock certain character movesets. You can of course unlock character alts by just playing the game regularly and doing certain challenges, but it will take far longer and you're going to have to do the trials one day anyway. That is if you want to get to the final challenge Risk of Rain Returns has to offer. I actually really like the Providence Trials. Some of the challenges are really fun and creative. Some even have some references thrown in. But I'd be lying to you if I didn't say some of them are just unbearable, especially this one. Fuck this trial. Some of the alts for the game feel like they were made specifically for a trial, and then don't translate perfectly into actual gameplay once unlocked. But that's about my only complaint for this part of the game. Overall, trials are inoffensive. They tried something new, and some will love it and some won't. It's all down to preference, and at the end of the day, it's completely optional. Now, I personally have very little in terms of flaws and complaints for the game, but that's not to say I have none. Although the new character screen is a massive improvement, it doesn't quite land as hard as the escape pod for me. Item descriptions tend to be quite vague, and not give you the actual stats per stack, and this would be an issue if knowing what your items do had any effect on your experience whatsoever. You reach a point in Risk of Rain where the screen is no longer recognisable, and whether you know what your items do or not, you have no choice on what you're given, and you have no input on what they do. So I guess, shut up and enjoy the ride. This one is going to be my only genuine complaint, as I consider it a legitimate flaw in the very design of the game. Apparently the GUPs have legs. I don't know how I've never noticed this before, but since making this revelation, I've not slept the best. Just like how I have fond memories of the Devil Johor eating his own tail for over a decade before the internet proved I'd been gaslighting myself the entire time, I was so sure the GUPs didn't have legs. I was certain. And then I looked at the cover page, and oh boy did they have legs. A bit too many if you ask me. Some of the enemies in this game really upset me, specifically the bugs from the temple who have unironically came up in conversations with my recent therapist. It's probably a skill issue, but I don't really care. Some of the previously mentioned character alts are really not that great. It's wild to me that Acrid gives up 2 of his most damaging moves, and in return he gets the funny ball, and the ability to forget what your alternate even does, activate it, and teleport back to wherever you left it last. Artificer also gives up her flamethrower for a ball of fire. Now that sounds pretty cool, but it's controlled by your own movement, in a game where movement is so critical to survival. This is genuinely impossible to use in my opinion. Future me here, don't listen to a single thing I said. I was so wrong. The fireball is actually insanely cracked, and I won't hear any slander on it. Some attacks in the game don't hit when it feels like they should. Now you would think I'm complaining about my own attacks not landing, but I'm not. Turn on auto jump and watch as you avoid 90% of the game's damage by simply never touching the floor. This is especially true for Tony Hawk over here. And that's it really. It seems like I'm glazing the game, but I genuinely find it hard to pick fault with anything in this game. It's just that good. Returns should be a shining example for the future, showing that there are games out there that deserve to be revisited and if possible, greatly improved upon. Is it the best game I've ever played in my entire life? No, I don't think it is. But this game, this remake, does what it does so well that I respect it more than I would my favourite game. I felt so emotional playing this for the first time because it's just brimming with passion and love in an era where such a thing is hard to find in a new IP, let alone a remake. This really ended up being Risk of Rain 1, 2. It's everything the game could have been, but better. It's so much better. And I have nothing but praise for the developers for coming back and creating something like this, when literally no one asked for it. Even if Hoppo were on their way out, and the current state of the series is a little dire. They left us with a new standard for remakes, one that should inspire the gaming industry. I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself. It's very unlikely. But who knows? Maybe. Well then, I finally did it. This is the end of the video, but I wasn't quite done rambling yet. I'm making this video because this game made me feel something I haven't felt in a long ass time, though I can't really identify what that feeling is. In a canon event 3 years ago, I told someone I'd never met before that I'd make this video, and I feel I've finally made good on that promise. I'm glad he stuck around with me long enough to witness it be done, even if it is a jumbled, inexperienced clump of hyperfixations, inside jokes, and schizophrenic ramblings. Because they're my ramblings. A lot of time has passed while making this. My mood, my opinions, my style rapidly shifted with every session I spent working on this. At times I wondered if it was even worth posting if I didn't know what I wanted it to be. I'm slow, easily confused, and I procrastinate a lot. I struggle to really put in the effort for the things I'm interested in, and I hold myself back with my various mental problems. But this has been some of the most fun I've had in a long time, and I'm surely looking forward to making more. I dedicate this video to that man who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and my friends who kept me motivated during the fucking lengthy process. And let me tell you, I know this video is dog shit quality, and it should not have taken me half a year. But I made the painful decision of using as much of my own footage as humanly possible, even for games where they were only on screen for a minuscule amount of time. I would record a game for 3 hours just to get the perfectly synced up visuals I needed for a 5-second bit. Almost everything you've seen is my own footage, except for a handful of clips, memes, and visuals, of which I will try my best to link down below. This video was always about me, made by me, for me, to talk about the things I like. But if by some miracle you happen to enjoy that, I thank you and hope that you'll be around in a year for the next one. It's raining outside right now. I guess it's time to go to sleep.